Hello, everyone. I'm Holly. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Birmingham, working in the cruise lab, and I'm going to be talking about heart rate changes when listening to stories. So in our lab, we're kind of interested in consciousness, and a lot of the work in the lab has kind of been trying to detect kind of residual consciousness in patients with disorders of consciousness, particularly using language. But kind of another interest in the lab is trying to find physiological markers to go alongside sort of neural markers of conscious perception. So my kind of PhD work has been based on this effect called heart rate change synchrony, which was kind of I've basically been trying to build on this like really interesting study by Perez and colleagues that I recommend you go read. It's really cool. They basically found that when individuals listen to the same story, their heart rate changes synchronize. So you don't have to be listening to the story kind of at the same time as someone else. It basically just means that your heart rate will speed up or slow down at the same time as other people, kind of like relative to where you are in the story. And this synchronization is modulated by attention. So when you're kind of paying attention, synchrony is higher than when you're distracted. And they also found that the synchrony appears to be lower in patients with disorders of consciousness, which is why we're kind of trying to investigate this further. And the measure used for kind of synchrony is called intersubject correlation of heart rate. So you'll see me kind of refer to this in the presentation. And it basically just gives you a measure of how similar are my heart rate changes to kind of everyone else in the group that we're comparing. And kind of since that initial paper, there's been a few more kind of linking the heart to the brain as well as the eyes. And Madsen and Para found that kind of the strength of intersubject correlations are co-modulated across the kind of different modalities. So when your kind of brain activity is more synchronized with other people, so is your heart rate changes and the eye measures as well. So that's kind of like, seems to be like a link between the brain and the heart there. So my kind of questions I've been looking at during my PhD is kind of trying to find what other factors drive this heart rate change synchronizations. And the kind of experiment I'm presenting today, we looked at whether kind of understanding the story itself is kind of important for these synchronizations. So I got 54 participants. These are all healthy people, not looking at patients at the moment. And we played them a story whilst we recorded their heart rate through ECG. So they listened to 30 minutes of a story. It's a children's story called Charlotte's Web, if you know it. And the story was split into kind of like 1-minute sections. And each minute was played in one of two conditions. So it was either the normal story, which is just, we completely unedited it, or a shuffled version, where essentially the story is split into 11-word windows, and then the words within those windows are just shuffled around. So the word order is kind of random. So an example of this, the normal sentence, 7 is a lucky number, luck had nothing to do with it, becomes nothing, do number, with 2 lucky, 8 is luck had 7. So hopefully you can appreciate it's all the same words, you can understand this, each individual word in this shuffled version, but when you put it all together, it basically makes no sense. So yeah, we played them 30 minutes in total, half in each condition, and sort of the order of conditions was pseudo-randomized. And we did have 2 groups of participants for this, where they heard kind of in the opposite condition. This was mostly just a control for like if there's a stimulus effect. We weren't actually interested in the effective group. This is just kind of a counterbalancing measure. And after each minute of the story, they did answer questionnaires so that we could check their understanding through a comprehension questionnaire. And also we did a lexical identification questionnaire, which is basically mainly just to check that they're actually paying attention, especially during this like weird shuffled version. And the analysis from this were basically, as you can expect, comparing this normal story condition versus the shuffled version. So these are results from the questionnaires, and we did find that people performed significantly better on both questionnaires when they listened to the normal story. So this is mainly just to check that our kind kind of the scrambling did affect comprehension, which we found it did. So this means we can now look at the heart rate data and compare it. And I should say this is all preliminary results for the heart rate stuff because we're still kind of finalizing our analysis. But we did find significant in-subject correlation of heart rate for both conditions, so it's above the level you'd expect by chance. However, when we compared our conditions, we found with our linear mixed effects model that this was non-significant, so it was like a marginally insignificant result. But as you can probably see, there appears to be some sort of group effect going on, which we didn't plan to look at, so it's not in our pre-registration, so we're still kind of trying to work out why this group effect might have come up. And we are running a couple of exploratory analyses to kind of further see what's going on. So something in those previous papers they did was a frequency resolved analysis, where you just split the heart rate signal into different frequency bands and then recalculate the heart rate synchrony. And we have done this, and it does appear to be some differences in certain frequencies, but we're not really sure what this means at this point, because we still need to run further statistics to check the significance. And one kind of final, again, exploratory analysis, we wanted to look for a semantic effect. So we decided to correlate the semantic dissimilarity of each word. So it's basically how surprising a word is given its kind of prior context. Correlate that against the interbeat interval surrounding that word. And when we did this, we found a negative correlation. So essentially, if a word is more unexpected or dissimilar, the interbeat interval was shorter. And this correlation was a lot weaker in the scrambled version, kind of suggesting that when we upset the context surrounding words, this effect of semantics is reduced. But again, this is a very exploratory analysis that we only ran last week. So do take it with a pinch of salt. It's just perhaps there's something going on. But yeah, to kind of quickly summarize, we did find significant heart rate change synchronizations when listening to a story, kind of replicating the previous studies. However, from our preliminary data, we can't conclude that narrative comprehension is important for these synchronizations to occur. But still, we have the long-term view that heart rate synchronizations or other kind of purely cardiac measures could be used alongside the sort of current neural measures that have been found to help evaluate these patients. And I just want to quickly say thank you to my supervisors, the people who provided us the stimuli, and also thank you for listening. And please, if you have any feedback, do come have a chat or send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, super interesting. With the studies, I always kind of wonder how much of this synchrony is related to because they're listening to a story. How much is that synchrony related to the actual kind of rhythm of the external stimulus that they both engage with? So is this really that they're synchronizing to each other, or they both synchronizing to something that is happening outside?
Yeah, well, the synchrony measure itself is just, we're comparing...
Or the change, I guess the change in their heart rate.
Yeah, it's the change in their heart rate.
It's kind of, whether it's kind of they changing more similar to each other, obviously, but are they just synchronizing to something that is kind of happening externally? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's kind of thought that the minimum requirement for the synchronization is to have a common stimulus. Whether that's a video, a story, there's music as well. That's kind of thought to be the minimum requirement. But yeah, I haven't tried.
I wonder if you put two people in just a quiet room,
yeah,
and whether I wonder if these in the studies, have they ever looked, so if you just sit, and would they just kind of also synchronize their heartbeat just by sitting in the same room, looking at each other?
I'm not 100% sure if someone's done it in silence. Something we did want to try is literally just playing people white noise, because it's there's nothing much going on there, and seeing what happens. The problem there is people kind of might start mind wandering and doing other things, so kind of unsure if that would actually give us anything useful out of that, but it might be something to try at some point.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, another short question. Hi, it's a very great presentation, and I'm very interested in the comparison for the narratives, and I just wonder why you don't find the heart rate difference or the correlations. Maybe they didn't evoke enough emotional or the deeper comparison, like knowledge information in their mind. So did you calculate all the checks your listening materials, like how the emotional information changed across the story, and also how the narrative changed, like the different events happened in your narrative materials?
Yeah, so we didn't take any like emotional measures during this experiment, but it's potentially a reason why we had this group effect. It could have been just that the group with the higher in-subject correlation in the normal version could have just maybe heard the more kind of emotional or engaging parts of the story. That could be a reason why we have this difference. If I did this again, I think we would like to take emotional kind of measures and compare different stimuli like that. But yeah, we didn't do that in the study. So.